For many of us, when we imagine a classic Christmas scene, we conjure images of snow-covered streets, carolers gathered under gas lamps, and families huddled around roaring fires. Images shaped largely by the traditions of the Victorian era. This period was a time of transformation for Christmas celebrations, and Edinburgh, with its bustling streets and evolving traditions, was no exception. By 1887, many of the Christmas customs we know today had already begun to take root, influenced by Victorian ideals. Christmas trees, popularised earlier in the century by Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, had become a staple in many homes, adorned with candles, baubles, and handmade ornaments. However, in Scotland, Christmas had been historically subdued due to its suppression during the Reformation, when it was banned for being associated with Catholicism. As a result, the holiday was not celebrated as widely or as exuberantly as in England, with Hogmanay remaining the dominant winter celebration. By the late 19th century, the influence of Victorian traditions was slowly reintroducing Christmas as a meaningful family occasion in Scotland. In Edinburgh, families would gather to decorate their trees while the scent of pine mixed with the cold winter air that seeped through the stone walls of their homes. The city's shops, particularly along Princes Street, would have been filled with festive goods, from seasonal treats to handcrafted gifts, as merchants sought to capitalise on the growing tradition of gift-giving. Carolling was another much-loved activity, and groups of singers would make their way through the city's famous streets, stopping at the modern homes of the new town to sing hymns and festive tunes. These songs were not just entertainment, they brought with them a sense of community and goodwill, a hallmark of the season. In churches across the city, services focused on themes of charity and reflection, urging congregants to think of those less fortunate during the coldest and darkest time of the year. For many in Edinburgh, the Christmas meal was the highlight of the day. While the wealthier families may enjoy roast goose or turkey, accompanied by puddings and mince pies, working-class families made do with more modest fare. Despite the difference in scale, the sentiment was the same: a chance to gather, share a meal, and celebrate togetherness. Yet for all its joy and festivity, Christmas in the Victorian era also carried a sense of melancholy. It was a time to reflect on the year past, remember those who'd been lost, and consider the fleeting nature of life. This mix of celebration and introspection made the holiday uniquely suited to ghost stories, a tradition that the Victorians embraced wholeheartedly. With Halloween growing in popularity over the past 100 or so years, ghost stories and Christmas may seem like an odd pairing to modern audiences. But in the 19th century, they were as much a part of the season as mince pies and carols. This tradition was immortalised by Charles Dickens, whose A Christmas Carol remains one of the most famous ghost stories ever told. And what many may not realise is that Edinburgh played a crucial role in inspiring Dickens to write this timeless classic. Dickens first visited Edinburgh in 1841, and his time in the city left a deep impression on him. Its Gothic architecture, shadowy closes, and stark contrasts between wealth and poverty provided a backdrop that resonated with the themes he would later explore in A Christmas Carol. The city's old town, with its dark alleys and towering tenements, seemed steeped in stories of the past, while the grandeur of the new town symbolised the aspirations of modernity. This juxtaposition of old and new, light and dark, deeply influenced Dickens' storytelling. During his visit, he became fascinated with a gravestone he stumbled upon in the Canongate churchyard, just off the Royal Mile. The headstone bore the name Ebenezer Scroggie, with the inscription identifying him as a mealman, a reference to his trade as a corn merchant. However, Dickens reportedly misread the inscription as mean man, and the error left a lasting impression. He later wrote that the idea of a miserly figure whose memory was so dishonourably preserved struck him deeply. While Scroggie himself was likely a respectable merchant, the name and mistaken epitaph undoubtedly contributed to Dickens' creation of Ebenezer Scrooge, one of literature's most enduring characters. But not all Christmas ghost stories are works of fiction. Edinburgh, with hundreds of years of history and haunting reputation, has its own share of tales where the supernatural crosses into the everyday. And one such tale unfolded just a short distance from the bustling streets of the new town, on Christmas Eve in 1887, in the quiet home of Dr W. Jameson on Rutland Street. Rutland Street in Edinburgh's West End reflects the city's shift toward modernity during the Georgian and Victorian eras. Built as part of the new town expansion, the area was designed to embody the aspirations of the time, orderly, refined, and distinctly removed from the crowded and chaotic medieval Old Town. By the late 19th century, Rutland Street was a desirable address, home to professionals and members of Edinburgh's growing middle class. Its grand stone facades and proximity to Charlotte Square, a cornerstone of the new town's architectural vision, offered a perfect blend of urban convenience and genteel living. Yet beneath its orderly exterior, Rutland Street shared the same layered history that permeates all of Edinburgh. The city's past, filled with moments of triumph and tragedy, often seemed to steep into the lives of its residents, as if the stones themselves held memories. In Dr Jameson's time, Rutland Street would have been quiet on Christmas Eve, with gas lamps casting a soft glow over the cobbled streets. Snow may have blanketed the ground, muffling the sounds of the city. It was the kind of setting where time felt slower, where the warmth of home was a welcome refuge from the cold outside. Yet for all its tranquility, Rutland Street would become the site of an event that blurred the boundaries between the living and the dead, a tale that continues to intrigue over 140 years later. As the faint light of dawn filtered through the partially closed shutters, the quiet of the room was broken only by the soft chime of the awakening bell. This was no ordinary morning for Dr Jameson. What he experienced in those moments would lead him to write a detailed account to the Society for Psychical Research, or the SPR, ultimately becoming one of the most well-known examples in their census of hallucinations. Dr Jameson's recollection began with a familiar sense of unease, the kind that often precedes a ghostly encounter. He was fully awake, lying in bed, but not yet risen. It was then that he noticed a shadowy figure at the foot of his bed. The figure was unmistakably that of a woman, medium in height, dressed in simple attire. She moved slowly but deliberately, as if she was silently gliding across the wooden floor toward him. The doctor was startled but not panicked, and he raised himself slightly, his eyes following the form as it approached. Compelled to understand what he was witnessing, he cautiously reached out to touch the figure. Yet, when his hand should have made contact, he felt nothing but the empty chill of the air. By the time it reached his side, the apparition had completely vanished. I was not frightened, he later wrote, but there was a distinct and undeniable presence in the room. He immediately lit the lamp on his bedside table and searched the room, but nothing was out of place. Reaching under his pillow for his watch, he noted the time, exactly 7:30 a.m. Dr Jameson's first reaction was to wake his wife. "You'll think I've lost my senses," he said, recounting the event to her, "but I swear I just saw Mrs G." Mrs G, as he explained, was one of his patients, a woman he'd called upon the previous evening. She'd been gravely ill but showed no immediate signs of being near death. The doctor described her as anxious and fearful during his visit, repeatedly asking if her husband had been sent for. Dr. Jameson assured her that everything would be done to make her comfortable. Later that morning, the doctor's unease grew when he decided to call on Mrs. G's household to check on her condition. The house was sombre, the staff subdued. He was met at the door by her husband, who delivered the news. Mrs. G had passed away that morning at precisely 7:30 a.m, the exact time Dr. Jameson had seen the apparition. The death certificate later recorded her passing at 7:55 a.m, but the discrepancy did little to shake the doctor's conviction that the apparition he'd witnessed was tied to the moment of her death. The days following the experience were filled with reflection. Dr. Jameson confided in his wife frequently, replaying the details of the encounter in his mind. She was standing there, clear as day, he told her one evening. Not a dream, not a shadow, it was her. I don't understand how or why, but I know what I saw. Mrs. Jameson listened patiently, assuring her husband of his sound mind. Although she didn't see the apparition herself, she recalled waking to find her husband sitting upright, his gaze fixed on something she couldn't see. She distinctly remembered him watching intently, as if following an unseen figure, and reaching out to touch it, his hand stopping in midair. Her account added credibility to the experience, reinforcing that something extraordinary had taken place that Christmas Eve morning. The experience left Dr. Jameson with more questions than answers. He was not a man given to superstition or wild imaginings. I was awake, he insisted during his interviews with Professor Sidgwick of the SPR. I was not unwell, nor was I in a state of heightened emotion. There is no explanation for what I saw other than it occurred as I described. His wife corroborated his state of mind, noting that he was of sound temperament and not prone to fanciful thoughts. In the weeks that followed, Dr. Jameson delved into the possibility of a logical explanation. He spoke with colleagues and even visited the site of Mrs. G's death again, hoping for some clarity. Yet, every path led him back to the same inexplicable conclusion. The SPR was particularly interested in this account, as it aligned with other examples of what they termed crisis apparitions. Visions of individuals at or near the time of their death, often appearing to those with whom they had a close connection. The census of hallucinations included Dr. Jameson's account as a prime example of such phenomena. The case also draws parallels to other documented apparitions. One notable comparison is the experience of Lord Charlesborough Broughton, who reported seeing the apparition of a family member while travelling in Scandinavia. In his statement to the SPR, Broughton described an encounter on a train where he saw his cousin, G.F., leaning back as if struggling for breath. Unbeknown to him at the time, G.F. had died that same day. Such stories, while varied in detail, share a common thread: the apparition's appearance at the exact moment of death, often carrying an emotional or urgent quality that lingers with the witness. Dr. Jameson's experience also raises questions about the nature of these apparitions. Were they mere hallucinations, conjured by the mind in moments of heightened sensitivity, or did they represent something more, a final attempt at communication from the dying? The stone tape theory, a popular explanation among paranormal researchers, suggests that moments of intense emotion or trauma can imprint themselves on the environment, creating echoes that replay under certain conditions. A famous example often cited is the ghost of Catherine Howard, the fifth wife of Henry VIII. Her tragic story has been linked to the haunting of Hampton Court Palace. According to accounts, Catherine was arrested at Hampton Court in 1541 after her alleged infidelities were uncovered. Overwhelmed with fear and desperation, she reportedly broke free from her guards and ran down to what is now known as the Haunted Gallery, screaming and begging Henry to spare her life. Her pleas were in vain, and she was later executed at the Tower of London. Visitors to Hampton Court have long reported sightings of a spectral figure, believed to be Catherine, running down the gallery in anguish. Others have heard faint, ghostly cries echoing through the corridor, or felt an unexplainable chill as they passed through. These reports are eerily consistent, yet the apparition appears unaware of those who witness her, suggesting it's not an intelligent haunting, but rather a residual one, a replay of her final desperate moments. The stone tape theory offers a compelling framework for understanding such phenomena. Catherine's understandable raw fear and emotional torment during her flight may have been so powerful that it's left a psychic imprint on the palace's very structure. Under certain conditions, such as specific atmospheric changes or heightened sensitivity from witnesses, these imprints may be replayed, allowing us to glimpse a fragment from our past. However, this theory fails to account for the specificity and immediacy of crisis apparitions, like Dr Jameson's, where the event is not tied to a location, but to the emotional bond between two individuals. Over time, Dr Jameson's account became the subject of frequent discussions within the society. Professor Sidgwick noted his consistency, saying, "What stands out in Dr Jameson's case is his unwavering clarity. He does not waver in his recollection, and presents his experience without embellishment or sensationalism." The account prompted further investigations into similar experiences, with researchers striving to understand whether these events were the remnants of residual energy or something more profound. The Jamiesons themselves found the experience a turning point in their lives. Friends and colleagues often asked about the event, to which Dr Jameson would reply carefully, "It's not a story that I tell lightly. It was not a dream, not a trick of the eye. I know what I saw, and it's changed the way I view the world." Mrs Jamieson, though supportive, expressed relief when the story began to fade from public discussion. "It was an unsettling time," she admitted to a close friend, "and I think we were both eager to return to normalcy." The house at number 35 Rutland Street, where Dr Jameson lived, no longer stands as it once did, its history absorbed into the ever-changing fabric of Edinburgh. As we reflect on the Rutland Street apparition, it's worth remembering the unique connection between Christmas and ghost stories. In Victorian times, tales of the supernatural were as much a part of the festive season as carols and candlelight. They offered a way to reflect on the mysteries of life, the fragility of human existence, and the bonds that tie us together, even beyond death. Dr Jameson's experience reminds us that Christmas isn't just a time of joy and celebration. It's also a moment to pause and think about those who are no longer with us. The doctor's encounter with the apparition of his patient speaks to the incredible power of human connection, even in the face of the unknown. Whether we see it as a ghostly visitation or a poignant projection of his concern for another person, the story carries a message of compassion and remembrance. In Edinburgh, the city of the dead, a city steeped in history and folklore, such tales remind us of the many layers of the past that coexist with the present. Just as the Victorians gathered around fires to share ghostly tales, we too can embrace the season as a time to tell stories. Stories that entertain, connect, and resonate with timeless themes of love, loss, and hope. So as we leave this tale behind and return to the warmth and light of the festive season, let it serve as a reminder that Christmas is not just a celebration of the present, but also a reflection on the past. It's a time to cherish those we hold dear, remember those we've lost, and embrace the spirit of the season, from the heart of Edinburgh and the echoes of its ghostly past, I wish you all a Merry Christmas and a peaceful, joyous holiday season.